The morning Karen Reese's cattle waded belly deep into her weed pond, while every other herd in 3 counties stood bawling at empty stock tanks. Hank Morrison finally stopped laughing. By noon, he was standing at her gate with his hat in his hands, asking if she had water to spare. 8 months earlier, Karen had stood in the equipment yard at Brindle Creek Ranch Supply, writing a check that made her hands shake. $12,000 for a backhoe rental and pond liner. The money had been earmarked for a new hay barn. The current one leaked so badly she lost a third of last winter's hay to mold. You're doing what? The clerk was Janet Morrison, Hank's wife, who'd known Karen since grade school and apparently felt that entitled her to opinions. Installing a pond. 2 acres. Honey, you've got the creek right there. Why spend money on a pond? Creek dries up in bad years. Pond won't. Janet's smile had that particular quality of patient concern that made Karen's jaw tighten. But you're planting it with, what did Hank say? Swamp grass, aquatic plants, cattails, rushes, duckweed, water willow. Native species that, weeds, Janet said gently. You're building a weed pond when you need a hay barn. Karen signed the check. Guess I am. Word spread through Brindle Creek, Oklahoma with the efficiency of wildfire. By the time Karen got the backhoe delivered, half the county seemed to know about her project. At the feed store, old Ray Kendrick shook his head. Karen, your daddy was a sensible man. God rest him. He want you to think this through. Already thought it. That's prime pasture you're digging up. 2 acres of good grazing. It'll be grazing again. Different kind. Ray exchanged glances with the men at the counter. The look said everything. Poor Karen. Trying to run that place alone since her husband left. Getting ideas. Her daughter Ashley called that evening from Tulsa, her voice tight. Mom, Cynthia's mom said you're building a swamp. A constructed wetland. It's different. People are talking. They think you're. Ashley paused. They're worried about you. Karen watched through the kitchen window as the backhoe operator shaped the basin. Decades of topsoil peeled back to reveal the red clay beneath. Tell Cynthia's mom I'm fine. You can't keep doing weird things and expect people to understand. Not asking them to understand. Just asking them to leave me alone. After Ashley hung up, Karen went outside. The evening was still hot. Oklahoma summer clinging hard into September. The Brindle Creek that bordered her property was already low, showing rocks that shouldn't surface until October. She'd seen this before. The drought of '06 that killed 30% of the cattle in the county. The one in 11 that bankrupted the Hastings family, forced them to sell land their people had held since the land run. Her neighbor Hank Morrison ran 500 head on 2,000 acres. Modern operation, everything by the book. When Karen had mentioned her pond plan at the co-op meeting, he'd actually laughed out loud. Karen, you want a swimming hole? Just say so. Don't dress it up as agriculture. It's for the cattle. Cattle need clean water. Not a mosquito farm. These plants filter water. Create habitat. The whole system, Hank interrupted. Sounds like something from a hippie magazine. We've got perfectly good stock tanks. You want to waste money on decorative plants. That's your business. But it wasn't about decoration. Karen had spent 2 years researching, talking to range ecologists, visiting a ranch in the cross timbers that had implemented silvopasture with integrated wetlands. She'd seen what happened when you worked with water instead of just storing it. The way vegetation cooled the microclimate. The way roots held moisture in the surrounding soil. The way a properly designed system could sustain itself through conditions that broke conventional operations. The pond installation took 3 weeks. Karen planted it herself, knee-deep in mud, setting cattail, rhizomes and rush plugs while Hank's ranch hands drove past and honked, shouting comments she pretended not to hear. Looking good, Karen. Gonna raise frogs. Hey, when's the duck season start? She didn't respond. Her grandmother had taught her that. Don't argue with men who've already decided you're raw. Just proceed. Let the work speak. By October, the plants were established, green spears of cattails rising 3 feet, rushes spreading in dense mats, duckweed filming the open water. Karen's cattle investigated cautiously, then discovered the plants were edible. They began grazing the edges, wading in to reach the tender growth. At the November co-op meeting, Hank made a show of it. Karen's built herself a real nice ornamental feature. Hope it doesn't breed too many mosquitoes come spring. Laughter. Karen kept her eyes on her coffee. The extension agent, a young man from Oklahoma State, tried to be diplomatic. Actually, Constructed wetlands can have agricultural applications. In the right context. Right, Hank said. The context of wasting good pasture land. Karen went home and walked the pond in the dark. The water reflected stars. The plants rustled. The system was working exactly as designed. By spring, she'd be able to rotationally graze it, the fastest growing forage on her entire ranch. She just needed time for everyone else to see it. The drought started in March with a high-pressure system that settled over Oklahoma like a lid on a pot. By April, the long-range forecast used words like extreme and prolonged. By May, Brindle Creek was a series of stagnant pools. Karen watched her neighbors start hauling water. Big tanker trucks making the 30-mile round trip to the municipal well, filling stock tanks that the cattle drained in 48 hours. The math was brutal: fuel costs, time, the physical toll of crisis management stretching into weeks with no end visible. Her own pond stayed full. The aquatic plants transpired water, yes, but their root systems created a seal that prevented the catastrophic seepage of conventional ponds. The shade they provided reduced evaporation by 60%, and the water itself stayed cool, oxygenated, alive. More importantly, the plants kept growing. Cattails shot up 6 feet. Water willows spread across the shallows. Rushes thickened into grazing grounds that her 40 head of cattle had learned to love. She rotated them through in sections, giving the plants time to recover, harvesting the growth in a sustainable cycle. The pasture surrounding the pond stayed greener than anything else in the county. The moisture that seeped laterally from the wetland, the cooling effect of the vegetation, the improved soil biology from the cattle spending time in and around the water, it all combined into something her neighbors weren't seeing on their own land. At the feed store in late May, Ray Kendrick looked older. Lost 12 head, he said quietly. Heat stress. Couldn't keep them hydrated. I'm sorry, Ray. You still got water? Yes. He nodded slowly. Didn't ask how. Pride, maybe. Or the deep unwillingness to acknowledge that the weird choice might have been the right one. Hank Morrison stopped laughing by early June. His operation was bleeding money. The water hauling alone was costing him $3,000 a week. Karen saw his trucks pass her gate, saw the dust plumes, saw the strain in Janet's face at church. How's the pond? Janet asked one Sunday, carefully casual. Good. Producing well. Producing? The cattle graze it. It's high-protein forage. Fast recovery time. Janet's smile didn't reach her eyes. That's nice. But the tone had shifted. The mockery was gone, replaced by something harder to name. Confusion, maybe. The beginning of reassessment. Ashley came home for a weekend in mid-June, shocked by the contrast. Mom, your fields look incredible. How the pond? It's cooling everything around it, changing the whole microclimate. But everyone said everyone was wrong. They walked the property together, Karen pointing out the volunteer vegetation that had sprung up in the zone of influence. Native grasses that had lain dormant for years, now triggered by the increased soil moisture. The cattle looked healthy, sleek. They spent the hottest part of the day standing in the pond itself, grazing the underwater plants, staying cool while herds across the county huddled in inadequate shade. You knew this would happen, Ashley said. Hoped. Didn't know for sure. But you spent the money anyway. Karen looked at her daughter. Sometimes you have to trust what the land tells you, even when everyone else is calling you crazy. The call came on a Wednesday morning in July. Hank Morrison, his voice carefully neutral. Karen, you got a minute? I'd like to come by. Sure. He arrived an hour later in his good truck, freshly washed despite the drought. Stood in her driveway like he was waiting for permission. Walk with me, Karen said. They toured the pond. Hank didn't speak for a long time, just watched the cattle wade through the shallows, grazing contentedly. Watched the wall of green vegetation, the clear water, the whole thriving system. I was wrong, he finally said. Karen waited. I laughed at you. Called it a waste. I was wrong. Yes. I've lost 87 head. Heat, dehydration, stress. I'm looking at bankruptcy if this doesn't break soon. The words cost him. Karen could see it in the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. Hank Morrison didn't admit mistakes. Didn't ask for help. What do you need? She asked. I don't know. Advice? I can't build a pond like this in time to matter. But maybe there's, he stopped. I don't have the right to ask. Ask anyway. Could my cattle use your water? I'd pay. Whatever's fair. Karen looked at the pond, calculating. 40 head of her own. The system could handle more, especially with careful rotation. 20 head. That's all I can sustainably manage. 20's better than none. $50 per head per month. And Hank. Yeah. You tell people why you're doing it. You tell them the weed pond saved your cattle. His jaw worked. Then he nodded. Deal. Word spread faster than the first time. By the weekend, Karen had 3 more neighbors asking. By the following Tuesday, the local AG reporter showed up, wanting to write a story. Constructed wetlands show promise in drought management, the headline read. Karen's photo was small, but her name was everywhere. The phone started ringing. The article ran in mid-July, picked up by the Oklahoma Cattlemen's Association newsletter, then the Regional Farm Bureau Digest. By August, Karen had a waiting list of 17 ranchers wanting site consultations. She walked her pond every morning, checking water levels, monitoring plant health, managing the rotation of cattle, hers and the 60 head from 4 neighboring operations now paying to use the system. The economics had shifted dramatically. The pond that everyone called wasteful was generating $3,500 monthly in grazing fees, more than covering its installation cost. But money wasn't the vindication. The vindication was in the soil itself. The pasture within 300 feet of the pond stayed green through August, when the rest of the county turned brown and cracked. Soil samples showed moisture content 20% higher than areas farther out. The lateral seepage from the wetland, combined with the cooling effect of the vegetation, had created a microclimate that defied the regional drought. Ashley quit her job in Tulsa in September, came home with a degree in business administration and a plan to formalize the consulting side of what was becoming a small agricultural revolution. Mom, we could do this properly. Schedule site visits, charge real consulting fees. You're sitting on something ranchers need. I'm a rancher, not a consultant. You're both now, whether you like it or not. The first workshop happened in October. 13 ranchers from 6 counties, standing around Karen's pond while she explained hydrology, plant selection, grazing rotation. They took notes like their operations depended on it. Because they did. Ray Kendrick attended, sat up front, asked good questions, stayed after to help load chairs. I should have listened, he told Karen. When you first mentioned this at the co-op. You weren't ready to hear it. None of us were. We thought we had it figured out. Modern methods, conventional wisdom. He shook his head. Turns out the old ways still got something to teach us. Not old ways. Different ways. Working with water instead of just containing it. The county extension office called in November. Could Karen speak at the Winter Agriculture Conference? Demonstrate her methods for the State Cattlemen's Association? She agreed. Not for recognition, but because the information needed spreading. Too many ranchers were still hauling water, still losing cattle, still operating under assumptions that the changing climate was making obsolete. The drought broke in January with 3 inches of rain over 4 days. Karen's pond absorbed it, the plants filtering the runoff, the water table rising. Across the county, conventional stock tanks overflowed, eroded, caused problems. Her wetland just grew lusher. Hank Morrison came by on a cold February morning. On building 1, he said. 5 acres. Got the plans drawn up. Talk to the same ecologist you used. Good. I wanted to say, he paused. I wanted to say thank you. For the water use. For not gloating. For helping when you could have just let me fail. That's not who I am, Hank. I know. That's why it means something. He left an envelope on her porch rail. Inside was a check for $6,000. Back payment, the note said. For the months I should have been paying more. She didn't cash it. Sent it back with a note of her own. Pay it forward. Help someone else learn. By spring, 7 ranches in the county had wetland construction projects underway. Ashley had formalized the consulting business, charging fees that reflected the value of Karen's knowledge. The waiting list stretched into the following year. The local paper did a feature. Brindle Creek Ranchers Innovation Transforms Drought Management. The photo showed Karen standing beside the pond, cattle waiting in the background, the whole system green and thriving. Janet Morrison stopped by one evening, carrying a pie. I owe you an apology, she said. For what I said. For what we all said. You were worried. People worry. We were. Dismissive. That's different. Janet set the pie on the porch table. Hank's different now? More willing to listen. Less sure he knows everything. Drought teaches humility. You taught humility. The drought just made us ready to learn. After Janet left, Karen walked the pond one more time. The evening was cool, spring arriving early. Frogs sang from the shallows. Swallows skimmed the water, catching insects. The cattle grazed peacefully, moving through the rotational sections with practiced efficiency. Ashley joined her, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "Mom, I got an email from the USDA. They want to feature your operation in a climate resilience program. What's it pay? It's not about money." "Then no. We've got 17 consultations scheduled. That's work that pays. That's knowledge going to people who need it." Ashley smiled. "You're impossible. I'm practical." They stood together in the quiet, watching the light fade over the wetland. The pond that everyone had mocked. The weeds that everyone had dismissed. The system that had proven itself in the only language that mattered to ranchers: survival. Karen Reese had never needed vindication. She'd needed time for the truth to grow, for the water to do its work, for the land to demonstrate what she'd always known. That sometimes the conventional wisdom was wrong. That sometimes the weird choice was the right one. That listening to the land itself was worth more than 100 expert opinions. The cattle waded through the shallows, content and healthy. The pasture stayed green even as winter released into spring. And Karen, standing beside the pond that had saved not just her operation but 6 others, felt the quiet satisfaction of being devastatingly, completely right. Tomorrow, 3 more ranchers were coming to learn. The work continued. The land provided. And Karen, as always, would be there at dawn, calloused hands and sun-weathered face, proceeding forward with the steady confidence of someone who'd never needed validation. Just time for the water to prove what the weeds had always known.